The first thing Jimin noticed was not the laughter, it was the look. The way Jungkook's eyes lingered on someone else across the crowded hall for a second too long. Music thundered through the venue, lights flashed like distant lightning, and dozens of voices blended into an endless ocean of noise. Yet in that single moment, everything around Jimin seemed to fade. His chest tightened, because he knew that look. He had memorized every version of Jungkook's gaze over the years, the playful one, the protective one, the curious one, and the rare gentle one he showed when he thought nobody was watching. Now that gaze belonged to someone else. Jimin forced himself to smile as cameras continued flashing around them. No one noticed, no one ever noticed. That was one of Jimin's greatest talents. He could hide a broken heart behind the brightest smile in the room, but tonight felt different. Tonight the crack inside him felt impossible to conceal. Across the room, Jungkook laughed at something a young stylist had said. The stylist touched Jungkook's arm, a simple gesture, meaningless, ordinary. Yet Jimin felt something sharp twist inside his chest. He hated himself for feeling that way. He hated the jealousy, hated the insecurity, hated how one innocent interaction could unravel years of carefully built emotional walls, because the truth was simple. Jimin had spent years convincing himself he expected nothing, years teaching himself that some feelings were better left unspoken, years pretending friendship was enough, but some lies became harder to maintain with time, especially when the person you loved stood only a few meters away. Jimin, the voice startled him. He turned. Taehyung stood beside him with a concerned expression. You okay? Jimin immediately smiled. Of course. Answer came too quickly. Taehyung raised an eyebrow but said nothing. Instead, his gaze briefly followed Jimin's line of sight. Toward Jungkook, understanding flashed across his face. It vanished just as quickly. You should get some air. Jimin chuckled softly. Am I that obvious? Only to people who know you. The words lingered. Jimin nodded before quietly slipping away from the crowd. The night air outside felt colder than expected. The city stretched endlessly beneath the building's rooftop terrace. Thousands of lights shimmered like distant stars. For a moment, silence embraced him. He closed his eyes, breathed deeply, tried to calm the storm inside. But memories kept coming, years of shared laughter, late-night conversations, comforting touches, inside jokes, moments that meant everything to him, moments that perhaps meant something entirely different to Jungkook. That uncertainty had always haunted him. Because Jungkook had never promised anything, never crossed any line, never given false hope. The feelings were Jimin's alone, a burden he willingly carried. The rooftop door opened behind him. Jimin didn't need to turn around, he already knew. Only one person moved with that familiar rhythm. Only one presence could make his heartbeat betray him so completely. Found you. Jungkook's voice was soft, warm, dangerously familiar. Jimin opened his eyes. What are you doing here? Jungkook stepped beside him, the city lights reflected in his dark eyes. You disappeared. So I got worried. A bitter laugh escaped Jimin before he could stop it. Jungkook frowned. What's that supposed to mean? Jimin immediately regretted it, but weeks of bottled emotions were already pushing against the surface. Nothing. Jimin. His name sounded different when Jungkook said it, more personal, more dangerous. The silence stretched. Jungkook studied him carefully. Been avoiding me? Directness caught him off guard. Jimin looked away. No, you have, just been busy. You're a terrible liar. Jimin swallowed. The familiar scent of Jungkook's cologne drifted through the cool air. It made everything harder, because standing this close reminded him of everything he couldn't have, everything he shouldn't want, everything he couldn't stop wanting. Did I do something wrong? Jungkook asked quietly. The question hurt more than it should because the answer was no. Jungkook hadn't done anything wrong, he was simply living his life, existing, smiling, laughing, looking at someone else, and somehow that was enough to shatter Jimin's fragile balance. No, Jungkook sighed. Then tell me what's going on. Jimin laughed again, this time there was no humor in it. Do you really want to know? Something in his tone caused Jungkook's expression to shift. The playful confidence disappeared, only concern remained. Yes. City seemed to fall silent, even the wind felt still. Jimin stared at the distant skyline, at the endless sea of lights anywhere except Jungkook, because looking at him would make this impossible. For years he had protected this secret, protected their friendship, protected himself. Yet tonight exhaustion won. I saw you looking at him. The words emerged barely above a whisper. Jungkook blinked. What? The stylist. Confusion crossed Jungkook's face, then realization, then something else, something Jimin couldn't identify. You left because of that. The question sounded almost unbelievable. Jimin felt embarrassed instantly, pathetic, childish, jealous. Every ugly emotion he had tried to suppress suddenly stood exposed beneath the moonlight. He took a step back. Forget it. Jimin. I said forget it. Hurt in his voice surprised even himself. Jungkook stared at him, really stared, as if seeing him clearly for the first time. For several seconds neither spoke. Then Jungkook laughed softly, not mockingly, not cruelly, just quietly, disbelieving, and somehow that hurt even more. "Why are you laughing?" Jungkook shook his head. A smile appeared, gentle, almost sad. "Because all this time—" He stopped, his gaze lowered briefly, then returned, filled with an emotion Jimin had never dared hope to see. "All this time I thought I was the only one." Jimin froze, the world seemed to stop turning, the city lights blurred, the wind vanished, everything disappeared except Jungkook standing before him beneath the silver glow of the moon. Neither moved, neither spoke. Yet something invisible shifted between them, years of unspoken feelings, years of uncertainty, years of fear, slowly unraveling in the silence. And for the first time in a very long time, the ache inside Jimin's chest began to fade, not because the pain had never existed, but because he finally realized he had never been carrying it alone. Jimin could not find his voice. The confession lingered in the cold night air like something fragile, something that could disappear if either of them moved too quickly. Jungkook stood a few steps away, hands buried inside his jacket pockets, looking strangely nervous. That alone felt unreal. Jungkook, the person who always seemed fearless, was avoiding eye contact. For years Jimin had imagined countless versions of this moment, arguments, tears, rejection, awkward silence. Never this, never Jungkook looking just as terrified as he felt. "What do you mean?" Jimin finally whispered. Jungkook released a slow breath, his shoulders relaxed slightly. As in, he paused, searching for the right words. "I thought I was the only idiot who couldn't move on." Jimin's heart skipped, the city lights reflected in Jungkook's eyes. For the first time Jimin noticed how exhausted he looked, not physically, emotionally, as if he had been carrying something heavy for a very long time. Jungkook laughed softly. "Rehearsed this conversation so many times." "You have, hundreds." The answer came immediately. Without hesitation, without embarrassment, Jimin stared at him. "Then why didn't you say anything?" Jungkook smiled bitterly. "Because I was afraid." That surprised him. "Afraid?" Jungkook nodded. "Of losing you." The words landed directly in Jimin's chest, simple, honest, devastating. The rooftop suddenly felt too small, too quiet, too intimate. For years Jimin had convinced himself he understood Jungkook completely. Yet standing here now, he realized how much had remained hidden beneath the surface. Jungkook looked down at his hands. "Do you know how many times I almost told you?" Jimin shook his head. "A lot." A small smile appeared on Jungkook's face. There was that night after the concert in Busan. Jimin remembered immediately, the beach, the cold wind, the sound of waves crashing against the shore. They had stayed awake until sunrise talking about everything and nothing. "You almost told me then." Jungkook nodded. "I spent 2 hours trying." Jimin laughed despite himself. 2 hours, I was working up the courage. Image was so absurd that it felt strangely comforting. For once neither of them had been stronger than the other. Both had been equally afraid, equally lost, equally trapped. The realization eased something inside Jimin. For years he had viewed his feelings as a weakness, a burden, something unfair. Now he understood that Jungkook had been carrying his own version of the same weight. Neither had known how to put it down. A comfortable silence settled between them. Below, traffic moved through the city like rivers of light. Somewhere in the distance, a siren echoed briefly before fading away. Jimin leaned against the railing, the cold metal pressed against his palms. His mind felt strangely calm. The jealousy from earlier seemed distant now, almost embarrassing. Still, one question remained. "Stylist." Jungkook groaned immediately. Jimin raised an eyebrow. "What?" Jungkook covered his face. "Oh no." "What? You were jealous of that?" The laughter in his voice made Jimin glare at him. "Stop laughing. I'm trying." "You aren't trying." "I'm really not." Jungkook burst into laughter, a genuine, uncontrollable laugh that forced him to bend slightly forward. Jimin crossed his arms. The more annoyed he looked, the harder Jungkook laughed. Eventually Jungkook wiped tears from his eyes. "I'm sorry." "You don't sound sorry." "I'm not." Jimin shoved his shoulder. Jungkook nearly lost balance. That only made both of them laugh harder. The tension that had dominated the night finally cracked apart. For several minutes they simply stood there smiling. No secrets, no pretending, no carefully chosen words, just honesty. It felt liberating. A sudden gust of wind swept across the rooftop. Jimin shivered. Immediately Jungkook noticed. Without thinking, he removed his jacket and draped it over Jimin's shoulders. The gesture was automatic, instinctive, something he had probably done 100 times before, yet tonight it felt different. Because now Jimin understood what had always been hidden inside those small acts of kindness. The concern, the attention, the affection. Jungkook noticed him staring. "What?" Jimin smiled softly. "Nothing." But it wasn't nothing, not anymore. For years every meaningful moment had been followed by uncertainty, questions, doubts, fear. Now the uncertainty was gone, only warmth remained. The rooftop door suddenly opened, both turned. Taehyung stepped outside. He froze instantly, his eyes moved from Jungkook to Jimin. Then to Jungkook's jacket wrapped around Jimin's shoulders, then back to their faces. Understanding arrived immediately. Neither Jimin nor Jungkook said anything. Taehyung nodded slowly. Well, silence stretched. About time, Jimin groaned. Jungkook laughed. Taehyung pointed at both of them. You know how exhausting you've been. What? Jimin asked. For years. Jungkook covered his face. Oh no. Yes. Taehyung walked closer. Watched both of you stare at each other like characters in a drama for ages. Jimin wanted the ground to open beneath him. Jungkook looked equally embarrassed. Taehyung shook his head dramatically. I deserve compensation. Away, Jungkook muttered. No, please. No, Jimin laughed so hard he nearly doubled over. The sound echoed across the rooftop, warm, free, happy. And for the first time in a long time, happiness didn't feel temporary. It didn't feel fragile, because tonight wasn't the end of something. It was the beginning of honesty, the beginning of courage. The beginning of a future neither of them had dared imagine out loud. As the city lights shimmered beneath the endless night sky, Jimin looked toward Jungkook and found him already looking back. This time there was no misunderstanding, no uncertainty, no fear, only a quiet promise reflected in their smiles, a promise that whatever came next, they would face it together.
The ride back to the dorm was quieter than usual, not awkward, not uncomfortable, just different. Every glance felt meaningful now, every small gesture carried a new weight. Jimin sat beside the window, watching the city lights blur past in streaks of gold and white. Across from him, Jungkook was pretending to scroll through his phone, pretending, because every few seconds Jimin caught him looking up. And every time their eyes met, Jungkook smiled, a small smile, a private smile. One that made Jimin's heart race all over again. Taehyung noticed everything. Of course he did. He sat nearby fighting a losing battle against his own amusement. At one point he looked at the two of them and sighed dramatically. This is unbearable. Jungkook looked up. What did I do? Taehyung pointed at both of them, smiling. Jimin blinked, smiling. Yes. Taehyung threw his hands into the air. Neither of you can stop. Jungkook immediately looked away. Jimin suddenly became fascinated by the passing buildings outside. Taehyung laughed. Exactly. The moment felt so ordinary, yet Jimin treasured it, because for years he had imagined happiness as something dramatic, a grand confession, a life-changing moment. But maybe happiness was this, a shared smile, a familiar laugh, the comfort of knowing someone felt the same way. When they finally arrived home, most of the members disappeared toward their rooms. The long day had left everyone exhausted. Within minutes, the dorm became unusually quiet. Jimin headed toward the kitchen. He wasn't hungry. He simply needed a moment to process everything. The events of the evening still felt unreal. He opened the refrigerator and stared inside without seeing anything. His thoughts were too busy, too full, too overwhelmed. Smiling again, Jimin jumped. Jungkook stood in the doorway, looking entirely too pleased with himself. I am not. You are. I'm not. You are. Jimin rolled his eyes. Jungkook laughed. The sound instantly filled the room with warmth. For a moment neither spoke. The silence settled comfortably around them. No pressure, no expectations, just presence. Jungkook eventually walked closer, close enough that Jimin could hear his breathing, close enough that every heartbeat became impossible to ignore. You know, Jungkook said quietly, I thought tonight would end very differently. Jimin looked up. Differently? Jungkook leaned against the counter. I thought you were angry at me. I was. To surprise them both, Jungkook blinked. You were? Jimin nodded, a little. Jungkook winced. Sorry. It's okay. Really? Sincerity in Jungkook's voice made Jimin smile. You don't have to apologize. Maybe I do. What? Jungkook hesitated, then lowered his gaze. Not realizing sooner. The words carried genuine regret. Jimin felt his chest tighten, not painfully, tenderly, because he understood neither of them had been blind, just scared. Scared people often missed things that seemed obvious later. Jimin stepped closer. Then we're both guilty. Jungkook looked up. What do you mean? I didn't say anything either. A soft laugh escaped Jungkook. Fair point. Distance between them had nearly disappeared. Neither seemed eager to move away. Outside, rain suddenly began tapping against the windows, gentle at first. Then heavier, the sound filled the dorm with a comforting rhythm. Jimin listened for a moment. I love rain. Jungkook smiled. I know. The answer came naturally, without hesitation. Because Jungkook always knew. He knew which songs Jimin listened to when he couldn't sleep. He knew which foods he ordered after difficult days. He knew which movies made him cry. He knew which smile was genuine and which one was forced. Jimin realized something then. Love wasn't always hidden in grand declarations. Sometimes it lived inside observation, inside attention, inside remembering. The realization made his eyes sting unexpectedly. Jungkook noticed immediately. His voice softened. "What's wrong?" Jimin shook his head. "Nothing." Jimin, a familiar warning, one that meant Jungkook wasn't going to let the answer slide. Jimin laughed quietly. "I was just thinking about you." Jungkook froze. The reaction was so immediate that Jimin couldn't help smiling. "Impossible. I know." "No." Jungkook pointed at him. "Say things like that and then smile." "Why?" "Because then I forget how to function." Jimin laughed, a real laugh, the kind that made his shoulders shake. Jungkook stared at him. Completely distracted, completely captivated. And for once neither bothered pretending otherwise. The rain outside intensified, thunder rumbled somewhere in the distance. The kitchen lights reflected softly across the polished floor. Time seemed to slow. Jimin suddenly realized how peaceful he felt. No jealousy, no uncertainty, no fear of losing something that had never belonged to him. For the first time, he wasn't imagining possibilities. He was living one. Jungkook stepped closer. Close enough that Jimin could see every detail of his face. The tiny scar near his cheek, the slight exhaustion beneath his eyes, the warmth in his expression. Neither looked away. Not this time, not anymore. A smile slowly appeared on Jungkook's face, not playful, not teasing, something gentler, something deeper. And Jimin felt his heart settle into a calm rhythm he hadn't known was possible. Outside, the storm continued across the sleeping city. But inside the quiet dorm, surrounded by soft light and the sound of rain, everything finally felt at peace. For years, Jimin had thought love would arrive like lightning, sudden, powerful, impossible to ignore. Instead, it arrived like the rain beyond the window, steady, patient, always there waiting for him to notice. The next morning arrived wrapped in soft sunlight and the lingering scent of rain. For the first time in a long while, Jimin woke without the familiar heaviness in his chest. The room felt brighter. The air felt lighter. Even the distant sounds of the city outside seemed gentler somehow. For several seconds he simply lay there staring at the ceiling. Then the memories of the previous night returned, the rooftop, the confession, Jungkook's smile. His heart immediately started racing again. Jimin covered his face with a pillow. This was ridiculous. After everything that had happened, he still didn't know how to act normally. A knock sounded at his door. Before he could answer, the door opened. "Good morning, Jungkook." Jimin sat up so quickly he nearly fell off the bed. Jungkook burst into laughter. "Wow, don't, you almost died." "I didn't." "You absolutely did." Jimin threw a pillow at him. Jungkook caught it effortlessly. The smile on his face somehow grew even brighter. For a moment neither spoke. The atmosphere immediately shifted. A comfortable silence settled between them, the kind that only existed between people who understood each other completely. Jungkook eventually glanced toward the hallway. "Others are making breakfast." Jimin raised an eyebrow. "Others? Actually, Jin Hyung is making breakfast." "That sounds more accurate." Jungkook laughed, then his expression softened. "Come eat." Something about those simple words warmed Jimin's chest. Come eat, not because of what was said, but because of how it was said. As though Jungkook genuinely wanted him there, as though his presence mattered. Jimin stood. They walked toward the kitchen together. The moment they entered, chaos greeted them. Jin was arguing with Taehyung about something involving eggs. Namjoon appeared deeply confused. Hosok was laughing. Yoongi looked ready to return to bed, and Taehyung immediately noticed Jimin and Jungkook arriving side by side. His eyes widened dramatically. "Oh," Jimin groaned instantly. "No, yes," Taehyung pointed at them. "Look who's glowing. I'm leaving." "You just got here." "I'm still leaving." Everyone laughed, even Yoongi, which was rare enough to feel historic. The teasing continued through breakfast. Nothing cruel, nothing uncomfortable. Just the affectionate kind of teasing that existed between people who cared about one another. And strangely, Jimin didn't mind. For years he had hidden his feelings, protected them, guarded them. Now there was no need. The relief felt incredible. Hours passed quickly, schedules came and went. Meetings filled the afternoon. Interviews occupied the evening. The day moved with its usual relentless pace. Yet everything felt different. Every crowded room felt easier to navigate. Every exhausting moment felt lighter. Because whenever Jimin looked up, Jungkook was there, sometimes across the room, sometimes beside him, always close enough to remind him that last night had been real, not a dream, not wishful thinking. Real. Late that evening, after another long day, they finally found themselves alone again. The practice room was empty. Most of the lights had already been turned off. Only a few remained, casting long shadows across the polished floor. Jimin sat against the mirrored wall. Exhausted, comfortably exhausted. Jungkook dropped down beside him. For several minutes neither spoke. They simply listened to the quiet hum of the building around them. Eventually, Jungkook broke the silence. "Can I tell you something?" Jimin turned toward him. "Of course." Jungkook hesitated, a rare sight. Then he smiled nervously, and suddenly Jimin knew whatever came next mattered. "Few years ago," Jungkook began, "I almost left." Jimin's expression changed immediately. "What?" Jungkook lowered his gaze. "There was a time when everything felt overwhelming." His voice remained calm, but Jimin heard the weight behind it, the memories, the struggles, the exhaustion. "I was tired all the time." Room felt quieter. "I kept smiling because people expected me to." Jungkook laughed softly, a sad laugh, but inside I felt completely lost. Jimin listened carefully, without interrupting, without looking away. "Then one night," Jungkook continued, "you stayed with me." Memory clearly remained vivid. "I don't think you even realized how important it was." Jimin frowned slightly. "What night?" "The night we couldn't sleep." Slowly, recognition appeared. "Years ago, a difficult period, an exhausting schedule, a night filled with conversations neither of them had forgotten." Jungkook smiled faintly. "You talked until sunrise." Jimin remembered. "You looked upset." "I was," answer came quietly. "You kept talking about random things." Jimin laughed. "That sounds like me." "It does." Jungkook smiled. Then his expression softened. "You never asked me to explain what was wrong." Jimin stayed silent. "You just stayed." The words landed heavily, because sometimes the most meaningful support wasn't advice, it wasn't solutions, it was presence, simply refusing to leave. Jungkook looked directly at him. "I don't think you understand how much that meant." Emotion tightened Jimin's throat. The practice room blurred slightly. For years he had worried about what he couldn't give, what he couldn't say. He couldn't become, yet hearing this made him realize something important. Sometimes the smallest moments changed everything. A conversation, a smile, a shared silence. A decision to stay when someone needed company. Those moments mattered more than either of them had realized. Jungkook leaned back against the mirror, his shoulders relaxed, his expression peaceful. "I wanted to tell you that." Jimin smiled softly. "I'm glad you did." Outside the practice room, the building remained busy. People moved through hallways. Doors opened and closed. Life continued. Yet inside that quiet space, time seemed to slow once again, not because something dramatic was happening, but because two people were finally sharing the truths they had hidden for years. And with every conversation, every memory, every honest confession, they discovered something beautiful. The strongest connections were not built in a single moment. They were built across countless ordinary days, across years of trust, years of understanding. Years of choosing each other again and again without even realizing it. And now, for the first time, they were finally able to see the entire picture together.
The practice room remained quiet long after their conversation ended. Neither Jimin nor Jungkook seemed eager to leave. The mirrors reflected the soft overhead lights, creating a warm glow across the empty space. Outside, distant footsteps echoed through the hallway before fading away. Jimin sat with his knees drawn up slightly, watching Jungkook absent-mindedly spin a water bottle between his hands. There was something strangely comforting about moments like this. No cameras, no schedules, no expectations. Just the two of them. For years, those quiet moments had been Jimin's favorite. Now they felt even more precious. "What are you thinking about?" Jungkook's voice broke the silence. Jimin smiled. Jungkook immediately groaned. Again, you're making this difficult." Jimin laughed. "Every time you say things like that, my brain stops working." Answer was so sincere that Jimin nearly laughed harder. Instead, he simply shook his head. "Become very honest." Leaned back against the mirror. "So have you." For a moment they exchanged smiles. A calm settled over them, the kind that came after years of carrying unspoken feelings, the kind that came when there was finally nothing left to hide. Eventually, Jungkook stood and stretched. His shirt lifted slightly as he raised his arms. Jimin quickly looked away, unfortunately not quickly enough. "I saw that. Don't know what you're talking about." "You absolutely do." "Don't." Jungkook laughed. The sound filled the room, bright, warm, effortless. Jimin couldn't remember the last time he had heard Jungkook laugh so freely. It made something inside him soften, because beneath all the teasing and smiles, he knew Jungkook had been through difficult years. They all had the pressure, the exhaustion, the expectations. Sometimes it felt like the entire world was watching, waiting, judging, demanding, yet despite everything, they had survived together, and somehow that made this moment feel even more meaningful. "Come on." Extended a hand. Jimin looked up. "What?" "Let's go." "Where?" Jungkook shrugged. "No idea. That's not a destination." "Can be." Jimin stared at him. Jungkook grinned, the same reckless grin that usually led to unexpected adventures. After a few seconds, Jimin sighed dramatically and accepted the offered hand. The moment their fingers touched, something warm traveled through his chest. Not excitement, not nervousness, something steadier, something deeper, trust. Jungkook pulled him to his feet. Together they left the practice room and wandered through the mostly empty building. The late hour had transformed the usually busy hallways into quiet corridors. The silence felt almost surreal. As they walked, they talked. About everything, old memories, future dreams, embarrassing stories, favorite songs, childhood fears. Topics shifted naturally, flowing from one conversation to another. Hours seemed to disappear. At one point they found themselves sitting on a staircase near one of the upper floors. The city skyline stretched beyond a nearby window. Thousands of lights sparkled beneath the dark sky. Jimin rested his chin against his hand. It's beautiful. Jungkook followed his gaze. Yeah. But when Jimin turned toward him, Jungkook wasn't looking at the city, he was looking at him. Their eyes met. Neither looked away. The moment stretched, quiet, comfortable, real. Jimin felt his heartbeat quicken, not because he was nervous, because he was happy, truly happy. The realization surprised him. There had been so many years where happiness felt temporary, fragile, something that could disappear at any moment. Now it felt different, stronger, more certain, as though it had finally found a place to stay. Jungkook smiled softly. You know something? What? I used to think you were the bravest person I knew. Jimin blinked. Me, Jungkook nodded. Absolutely. Jimin laughed. That's ridiculous. Isn't. Jungkook, I get scared of everything. You still do things even when you're scared. Answer came immediately. As though Jungkook had already thought about it many times before. That's what makes someone brave. Jimin fell silent. The words settled somewhere deep inside him, because courage wasn't something he often associated with himself. Yet hearing it from Jungkook somehow made him believe it, at least a little. The conversation drifted onward. Eventually, the building grew even quieter. Most of the lights had switched off. The staff had gone home. Only a handful of rooms remained illuminated. The world seemed asleep. But neither of them felt tired. Not yet. As midnight slipped into early morning, they continued talking, sharing, listening, laughing the way they always had. Only now there was a new layer of understanding beneath every word, a deeper connection, one that neither needed to explain. When they finally returned to the dorm, the sky outside was beginning to lighten. A faint hint of dawn painted the horizon. The others were asleep. The hallways were silent. Jimin paused near his room. For a moment, neither moved. Neither seemed ready for the night to end. Then Jungkook smiled, a small, genuine smile. Good night. Jimin smiled back. Good night. Simple words, yet somehow they felt important. Because for the first time in years, neither of them had to wonder what the other was feeling. There were no unanswered questions left between them. No walls, no secrets, only honesty. And as Jimin stepped into his room and quietly closed the door behind him, he realized something. A look that had once broken his heart in that crowded hall now belonged to a memory. Because whenever Jungkook looked at him now, there was no uncertainty in his eyes. Only warmth, only trust, only the quiet promise of countless tomorrows still waiting to be lived together. Morning arrived far too quickly. Sunlight spilled through the curtains, painting golden patterns across the floor. Jimin blinked awake slowly, still wrapped in the warmth of sleep. For a brief moment, he forgot everything. Then the memories returned. The rooftop, the confession, the long conversation that lasted until dawn. A smile appeared on his face before he could stop it. He buried his face in his pillow. This was becoming a problem. Every memory of Jungkook seemed capable of making him smile now. A knock sounded at the door. Jimin sat up. Come in. Door opened. Not Jungkook. Taehyung. Jimin immediately narrowed his eyes. That expression alone made Taehyung burst into laughter. You're smiling. So are you. That's different. It's not. Taehyung walked inside and sat on the edge of the bed. For several seconds he simply stared at Jimin. The silence became increasingly suspicious. Finally Jimin sighed. What? Taehyung pointed dramatically. You look happy. Jimin rolled his eyes. Thank you for that groundbreaking observation. Seriously. Taehyung's smile softened. I haven't seen you this relaxed in a long time. Teasing disappeared from his voice. Only sincerity remained. That caught Jimin off guard, because he knew Taehyung was right. Something had changed. Constant uncertainty that had followed him for years was gone. The fear, the doubt, the endless questions, all gone. In their place was a strange sense of peace, the kind of peace he hadn't felt in years. Before he could respond, another voice echoed from the hallway. The smile returned instantly, traitorous, automatic. Taehyung witnessed the entire transformation. His jaw dropped dramatically. Oh wow, Jimin groaned. Don't. It's actually worse than I thought. Leave. I'm leaving. Taehyung stood, then paused near the door. His grin returned. Just so you know, everyone has noticed. Door closed before Jimin could throw a pillow at him. A few minutes later, he entered the kitchen. The smell of coffee filled the air. Several members were already awake. Most looked tired. Jungkook did not. Jungkook looked suspiciously energetic. Jimin should have known that was dangerous. The moment their eyes met, Jungkook smiled. A simple smile, nothing dramatic. It had immediately made Jimin's heart skip. Across the table, Yoongi noticed. Then he slowly looked away, as though he wanted absolutely no involvement in whatever was happening. Smart man. Breakfast passed peacefully. The conversation flowed naturally. The atmosphere felt light, comfortable. For the first time in years, Jimin wasn't overthinking every interaction. He wasn't searching for hidden meanings, wasn't analyzing every glance, wasn't wondering if his feelings were obvious, because now there was nothing left to hide. After breakfast, everyone prepared for another busy day. Schedules were waiting, interviews, recordings, meetings, life moved forward. Yet throughout the day, Jimin kept noticing small things that had always existed, things he had simply interpreted differently before. The way Jungkook always checked whether he had eaten, the way he unconsciously moved closer during group conversations, the way his eyes searched for Jimin whenever they entered a crowded room, the way he remembered tiny details nobody else noticed. Those moments weren't new, they had always been there. Jimin was only seeing them clearly now. That realization stayed with him all day. By evening, exhaustion finally caught up with everyone. The schedule ended later than expected. The drive home was quiet, most people slept. The city lights glowed outside the windows, rain threatened in the distance. Jimin rested his head against the glass. His eyelids felt heavy. The day had been long, very long. At some point, he drifted asleep. The next thing he knew, someone was gently shaking his shoulder. Jimin. His eyes opened slowly. The van had stopped. Everyone else had already gone inside. Only Jungkook remained. We're home. Jimin rubbed his eyes. Sorry. Jungkook smiled. You were tired. World still felt hazy from sleep. Without thinking, Jimin reached for Jungkook's hand. A simple gesture, half asleep, instinctive. For a second, neither moved. Then Jungkook's fingers tightened slightly around his, warm, steady, real. The moment lasted only a few seconds before they climbed out of the van, yet neither let go immediately. Cool evening air greeted them. Clouds drifted across the dark sky. The city seemed quieter than usual. Together they walked toward the dorm entrance, slowly, comfortably, neither in a hurry. Near the door, Jimin glanced upward. The first raindrop landed against his cheek, then another, and another. Within moments, a gentle rain began to fall. Jungkook laughed. Again, Jimin smiled. It likes following us. Rain grew slightly heavier. Not enough to run from, just enough to create a soft rhythm against the pavement. For a moment they remained there beneath the gray sky, listening, breathing, existing together. Jungkook eventually turned toward him. The lights from the building illuminated his face. There was something thoughtful in his expression, something vulnerable. Can I tell you another secret? Jimin nodded. Always. A small smile appeared on Jungkook's lips. Then he looked toward the falling rain. I think I started falling for you long before I realized it. Confession settled softly between them. Jimin felt his heartbeat quicken. Not from surprise, from the quiet honesty behind the words. Jungkook laughed softly. I was just too stubborn to notice. Jimin smiled. So was I. The rain continued falling around them, gentle, steady. The city lights shimmered through the water like distant stars. And standing there beneath the evening sky, they began sharing old memories once again, this time not as two people wondering what might have been, but as two people finally discovering how long they had already belonged in each other's story.